Sit down and keep an eye on Dave.
You put me in time.
Morning, everybody. Morning. Did you enjoy the food? Thanks to all our crew that came out real early this morning. Mike Tomei is the kind of the head chef. He doesn't wield it like Chef Ramsay does, but he's much friendlier. But thank you for putting that all together, Mike, and thanks to the crew that came out real early to cook. So I appreciate that very much. And it was delicious. There's still more if you want to go grab some, and more coffee as well. Just want to start with a short devotion. This is just a reading I found on, let's see, where am I now? On love, and I thought this was an interesting concept here in the way they phrase this. It's called a raging torrent. A raging torrent. Both the Old and New Testament teaches that the essence of true worship is the love of God. Our Lord declared this to be the sum of the law and the prophets. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. From Mark 12. Now, love is both a principle and an emotion. It is something both felt and willed. It is capable of almost infinite degrees. Love in the human heart may begin so modestly as to be hardly perceptible, and go on to become a raging torrent that sweeps its possessor before it in total helplessness. Something like this must have been the experience of the Apostle Paul, for he felt it necessary to explain to his critics that his apparent madness was actually the love of God ravishing his willing heart. In the love that any intelligent creature feels for God, there must always be a measure of mystery. It is even possible that it is almost wholly mystery, and that our attempt to find reasons is merely a rationalizing of a love already mysteriously present in the heart as a result of some secret operation of the Spirit within us. We can be certain that it is quite impossible to worship God without loving Him. Scripture and reason agree to declare this, and God is never satisfied with anything less than all. This must not at first be possible, but the inward operations of the Holy Spirit will enable us in this time to offer Him our outpoured fullness of love. Let us pray. Dear Lord Jesus, we thank you for our day. We thank you for coming together. Bless us in our hearing. Bless us to draw our hearts closer to you in love, that love may move us forward in faith to serve you. We thank you for this time and this place, and may our hearts and minds be open to the love that you have for us. In your name we pray. Amen. We have our guest speaker, Pardeep. Thank you for coming this morning, getting up early. It's bright and early on a Saturday morning, so on a cold Saturday morning. So thank you so much for coming up. Did you want me to start with the video?
Yeah, we can start with it.
Okay, let me start with that.
Serene morning. Had the windows down, thinking to myself, like literally thinking to myself, this is a beautiful morning. Life seemed, it was a script. I start to see squad cars flying by us. The squad car pulls up in front, like tapes it off real quick. I asked the police officer, like, sir, what's going on? He's like, son, there's a shooting that happened at the temple.
Police say the shooting began around 10:30 Sunday morning, as many inside the Sikh temple were gathering for worship. Witnesses said the first shots came outside, inside mayhem.
I felt anger. But then I felt this sense of relief. That like I wasn't involved in that. I also felt this incredible sense of guilt. For the past 5.5 years, I've continued to wrestle with those two feelings, survivor's guilt and survivor's relief. I am just appreciative to live this life, but I also have this guilt of I'm not doing enough.
You get all that? When we breathe in suffering and we breathe out healing.
Serve to Unite was founded in response to the August 5th, 2012 Sikh temple shooting. It was a means for the Sikh community to transform this atrocity into something inspirational that would bring people together from that day forward.
Was initially formed to bring about an awareness of the Sikh community, but then we knew that it was going to morph into something much bigger than that, to really address communal healing for all communities.
Today, Serve to Unite works with young people from 2nd grade through college. We do arts-driven service learning and global engagement. We also organize a 6K run every year to raise money for scholarships for 6 young people in honor of the 6 victims of the Sikh temple shooting. And recently, Pardeep and I have started working with small towns and municipalities, trying to help them become comfortable with demographic changes as populations are changing.
We're weaving in our parts of ourselves into a map of Milwaukee, to end the segregation, to bring everybody together.
There's places where people are just not as unified, and if we have a chance to change that, we should definitely do it. Especially with Milwaukee being like that, we should do as much as we can.
So this is the bullet hole that was left by the shooter as he was trying to shoot into the women that were here. He was just shooting from back here. And then Dad's final resting place was in this room, as well as the other priest who was working. And he gets out here, and as the responding officers are coming to the scene, they engage in a firefight with Wade Page. And Wade Page takes his own life. The shooter killed himself. There was not much explanation from law enforcement, so I said, let me reach out to Arnold and really find out why white supremacists do these things. You know, in a selfish kind of way, I also wanted someone to raise their hand and say, you know what, I'm responsible for this.
In 1987, me and a few friends of mine started a white power skinhead gang in Milwaukee. We started our own white power skinhead band also. And our band was very much a rallying point for like every pissed off white kid in Wisconsin.
We must secure the existence of our race and the future of our white children.
We like stoked their anger and their angst, and we blamed it on Jewish people, we blamed it on people of color, we blamed it on gay people. We later got involved in the early stages of what today is known as Hammerskin Nation, and that's the largest organized white power skinhead group on the planet Earth. So nowadays, when violence is perpetrated by this group, I feel a great deal of responsibility. And speaking of which, Wade Michael Page, the man who murdered Pardeep's father and 5 other people, was a member of that group. Basically, brought about an inner conversation where I'm saying, where do you get off thinking that you're going to go waltzing off into the sunset after all of the people you hurt, after all of the harm you've done? I left the movement in 1994. On paper, we couldn't have been more different, but when we sat down and talked, we saw how much we had in common, and it would hit us at that point, like, we need to work together. We got to do something together to basically get this message out to the world, and the more people we can help understand this, the better off we're all going to be.
Oh yeah, the murals. We had a group of people who painted murals on the walls of our school, and they had positive messages and things to bring the community together. We've also been doing
people of the high school age, that they're the next generation. So it's important to me for them to have a good community for themselves, which will bring a better community for the younger generation and for generations to come.
If we're going to be the antidote for what's wrong with our society, we really got to focus on what's right. In my experience, what's right is the truth that human beings have more in common than different.
The more voids that a child has, the more vulnerabilities. So filling those voids with sort of wraparound programming, it takes a village to raise a child. And somehow, some way, we step back from that saying, but I think that saying is more true now than ever. It takes the village to really nurture a child.
To have amazing people in my life like Pardeep Kaleka, who have taught me so much and who love me and I love them. Pretty much every day I'm literally in this state of joy and gratitude. That's what life's all about.
I can use that. Can you all hear me?
You want to use this?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
All right. So thank you all. Thank you for the companionship this morning. Thank you, Pastor Matt, at my table. We had a wonderful conversation. Thinking about what Pastor Chris said and the torrent of love. It seems that a lot of times the right thing is said at the right time when you need to hear it. And the right people show up in those right moments within our life. As long as we're sort of open to those things, quite honestly, I don't think sadness or suffering is something bad happening to you. I think sadness is really living a life where you're closed off to the life that you're supposed to live. And because we don't hear those messages of love, because we're not open to the omens that maybe exist within our life, I think that's sometimes sadness. This shooting that happened on August 5th, 2012, at that time was one of the deadliest hate crimes committed on U.S. soil by an affiliated white supremacist in nearly 50 years, since the time that 4 little girls endured the impact of a bomb intended for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we as a community understood our responsibility. And with that said, I think there was a part of faith communities, there's a part of faith communities that really understand that we do have a broader responsibility to the world. When things do happen to us or happen to people of faith, we need to respond. And so I think about that day and that torrent of love, and I think about all the people that showed up that day. We have choices in life. We can either see suffering and do something about it, or sometimes we can see suffering and almost negate it. That day as people left from their places of worship, this was around 10 o'clock in the morning, so people left out of their places of worship as they were finding out. They could have gone on with their own lives and said, okay, well, you know what, another tragedy that happens in America. But that day and continuing forward, and even today, we are still gathered. We are still bearing witness. We are still saying to whatever that is, that this will not happen, and if it does happen, we will continue to show up. So that was, you know, that was. Sometimes the video brings me back to a place, because when you're far enough removed from something, you almost feel like it was so long ago. But then this all floods back to memories, and maybe a part of me honestly kind of needs it to get to a place where I'm like, oh, that did happen. That was real. Because of the love that has been shown throughout the years. One of the questions that you guys might be having right now is, and I'll preemptively, and you know, I'll open up for a Q&A in a little bit, but one of the questions that you might have is, why on earth, Pardeep, would you reach out to a former white supremacist who started the same organization that the shooter belonged to 2 months after the shooting? Kind of think of that? So I will tell you this, and as that reflection that was being shared, the heaviness of having to carry community sometimes within our own little community, the Sikh community, I saw myself kind of as a bridge. And this bridge was really, most of the people that lost their lives were either first generation, or many of them were just new incoming immigrants. So I knew that they were children, they could not speak for themselves. I knew that some of the generation before me, who had been here for a longer time, also could not speak up for themselves. There was this internal fight as well as an external struggle. So the external struggle was relaying who we were as new immigrants and people of faith. The internal struggle was really this: I don't want to go out there. I don't want to go beyond these walls. I feel safe here. And isn't that kind of sometimes the internal struggle that we all have? Sometimes within our own body. I feel safe here. Within our own houses, I feel safe here. Within our own religious walls, I feel safe here. And safe might not be the exact word, but maybe comfortable. I feel loved. And so a lot of people from within the temple kicking and screaming and saying, I don't actually want this responsibility. I don't want to go out there. So being thrust into that and saying, okay, let's go put on this brave face for the world, because I know what was happening here was, you know, let's take it away from a person and let's take it into the ideology of division, the ideology of separation, suffering. And so he embodied that, the shooter did, but how were we going to react? Were we going to be fear? Was that ideology going to accomplish its task, which was to divide people, which was to beget fear? And I said that day, you know, I went home that night. Shooting started at 10 o'clock in the morning. We got notification around 10 o'clock at night. And even that whole 12 hours, and here I am, former police officer from the city of Milwaukee. I worked at District 7 for 7 years, or 5 years. It felt like 7 years. 5 years. For those that know where District 7 is, you know, the 36th to Fond du Lac, it's a pretty busy area. You know, we were going, generically people say you were humping because you were going from hitch to hitch. We had the busiest shift. In the busiest sort of regionality, which my regionality was 53206. And so those years of policing and thinking about the police work that was done that day, there was a little bit of begrudgment of saying, why did it take you so long to notify families? What did you not know? What did you not understand? So personalizing the process, even to the point that I was saying, well, why did it take so long for you to go inside this place of worship? Did you not know who was in there, or did you not know that people were bleeding out? Would it have been sooner if it was a different congregation? if the people were familiar, if they were more of a priority. That was all the internal struggle that was happening. So to kind of go out there and put on this brave face and say, listen, we all got to come together, we all got to forgive, we all got to love. Initially, forgiving through gritting my teeth and saying, yeah, we all got to forgive. That's good. The Lord calls us to forgive. It's tending to all of our fears, but quite honestly, not meaning it. And over the next 2 months, before I met Arnold, there was something in me that was saying, reach out to this person. I know you don't want to, but, and when I think about when I think about the weight of love, I think about the weight of care. And for those that are in relationships, how many people are have been in a long-term relationship? Almost everybody in here. And whether that relationship is with a partner, whether that relationship is with a friend, whether that relationship is sometimes with a church, sometimes the weight of care is a very heavy burden to carry. Right? It calls you to do things that maybe don't make life comfortable. Don't keep you in those walls. You have to put yourself out there often. Be vulnerable often. And there was a part of me when I reached out to him, I couldn't articulate it at that time. What I could articulate at that time is, the shooter killed himself after he killed 6 people. I want to know why. Because for me, the why was, I can't do the what if I don't understand the why. So I want to know the why. And since the shooter is dead, I need to know from a person who has lived that life, who has started that same organization. And that's what I thought at the time. I thought that I needed an explanation. And sometimes that's what we all do. We intellectualize a lot. We feel, sometimes we feel a little less than we intellectualize. So it's all kind of up here. And I was in the same place. I was like, explain to me, right, why somebody would do something like this. Meanwhile, there was another spirit that was working that said, I know what you want, but what you need is something completely different. You don't need an explanation. You need an experience. And that experience is going to happen to you, whether you like it or not. And so and at that time, meeting a former white supremacist, I told my wife and I told my mom, I told other people, and they all said, what do you think they said?
That's not a good idea.
Not a good idea. What do you think that's?
Crazy.
Crazy. You've gone crazy. What's going on? You must have PTSD. And I was like, you know what? I think I did have PTSD. Right? I was going through the symptomology of PTSD. I would be in a coffee shop and really think about, okay, what if a shooter comes in here? Where's the friendly wall? Some of my tactical stuff for policing. Right? I'm going back to it. And I'm like, maybe you didn't even work off the stuff that you were doing in policing. Maybe that's still with you as well. So a lot of layers. Just and as I'm telling them, one of the other things that came up was, once a white supremacist, always a white supremacist. Once a person, you can't change, a leper can't change its dots. And I was like, here we are. Sick. The word sick means learn. That's all. It simply means learn. And we believe that we go on this continuous journey as they learn. And the ultimate truth is learned once we understand that we exist in the existence of somebody else. And if I can see divinity within those people that don't look like me, walk like me, talk like me, believe like me, I got the same skin complexion, then I've seen God. Somehow, some way, I've seen a bit of that divinity to say, wow, I thought that homeless person was nothing like me, but really the divine resides in that homeless person too. Wow, and that's sometimes the spiritual challenge of a Sikh. And a Sikh, as a learner, you would say, people change. But a lot of Sikhs that I told that I'm going to go meet this former white supremacist were like, people don't change. They're the same. He didn't change. And I would love to think that I'm going to look this great for the rest of my life. But I'm going to change. We're all going to change. The world is going to change. Right? How do we understand that change to say, I'm not gonna say that it's not gonna happen, but I'm gonna embrace it so that I can actually be part of that change, so that I can be a productive citizen in that change. But that's kind of where sometimes people lie, and the more times that something is told to you, the more you start to believe it yourself. You're like, oh, I don't know if I do want to do this. I don't know if I do want to meet this person. And so the first time that we actually physically met, I asked him to meet me at a restaurant, and once he told me, I said, what restaurant do you want to go to? Because I was testing him. He's like, what restaurant do you want to go to? And he tells me, well, I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I don't want to go out to a bar. I'm like, thank God. We're not going to get, we're not going to down some pints and talk crazy to one another, hopefully. So then I asked, where do you want to go? He said, Thai restaurant. He said, Thai restaurant, okay. And in my mind, and we all sometimes have these stereotypes. And one of my stereotypes was honestly that white people can't handle spicy food. So, I know you can, I know. That's a stereotype that I had. But it was reassuring because here is this white supremacist, or former white supremacist. Here's this former white supremacist, and I was relieved that he said Thai restaurant. I was like, okay, maybe he's a big culture, maybe so. Anyways, I meet him at this Thai restaurant, and I see him, and I Google him, and he's going in, and I'm going in, and again, I'm outside in my car, and I have 4 kids by this time, and as parents, we have this excuse that we can always utilize, which is the kid excuse, which is like my kids came down with something and I have to go home, and everyone's kind of used it somehow. Never for church though yet. Never for church.
I heard it here.
Yeah. I see we got the segment right next door.
Yeah, that's
it. Never for church. But I was thinking about utilizing it. As I saw him going to the restaurant, I Googled him, I knew what he looked like. But then there was something, and I can't explain this, but there's a spiritual push that happens within all of us. We reach that point, and that point is we're questioning. And at the brink of that point, when it seems like you want to just kind of go back to being comfortable behind whatever wall we exist in, right? There's that push. You came here for a reason. Go. So I took my foot off the brake, put the car back in park, went inside, and I saw Arnold, and he was waiting at the door for me, flanked by 2 Asian waitresses. Another subconscious thought, because I think we do have to be honest with our subconscious if we're going to get to a better place. But one of my subconscious thoughts at that time, when I saw him flanked by 2 Asian waitresses, and Arnold's a big dude. Arnold's probably 6'3", 6'4". He's tattooed up. He's a much nicer guy now than he was before. But if you talk to people that knew him from that time, they would say that he was a complete sociopath, complete psychopath. So, people change. As I saw him flanked by these Asian waitresses, I thought in my mind, thank God he didn't eat the 2 Asian waitresses. And I'm like, why would you think that? People aren't that cannibalistic, but why would you think? So I had to really get in tune to my own subconscious. And that's the beautiful journey, is that sometimes this journey, this faith journey, yes, it takes us outside of ourselves to appreciate all of the beautiful things. But it also takes us on an internal journey to say, what is happening? Where does that reside? And why does it reside there? Pardeep, why are you fearful of a man in a Thai restaurant and because of all the things that you've heard about? Okay, let's be honest with that fear. And so, honest with that fear, went forward, wondering, what am I going to say to him? What is he going to say to me? You know, what is this conversation going to look like? And this is what I trust sometimes, is that I've never prepped a speech, I've never prepped a talk, I've never, and, you know, I just know that the right thing will be said at the right time for us to have a connection. And so, or the right thing happens before that time to have that connection. And so when I walk up to him and he walks up to me and, you know, I'm like, hey, how you doing, how you doing? And he looks at my eye and he's like, dude, what happened to your eye? And in the panic of meeting this person, I didn't realize that my eye looked really bad. A week before we were supposed to meet, I was giving my daughter a bath, and a loofah hook, it looks like this, like those loofah hooks on the shower organizer, went through my eye and came out the other side. So I wanted to do that way after breakfast, so we didn't lose it. But yeah, so it went through my eye, came out the other side. Luckily, it went through kind of the white part and then came out the other side, but it lacerated the muscle that controls your blinking. When it lacerated that, so my eye would just kind of sag like this, and the other one would be open, like this. And so I got the bright idea, I'm like, okay, I need to keep both eyes open. So I will just tape my eye up. And originally I started to tape my eye up with Scotch tape, because that was the closest thing you have. You know, like men, what we do is we grab the closest thing. We didn't go to the store, they could have got some other tape that would have been much better, a butterfly bandage, something. But I'm like, Scotch tape will do. So for a while, I used to tape my eye up with Scotch tape. Then by the time that I met Arno, I was using athletic tape. So it kind of looked like, you know, I was like one of those MMA fighters. And so he was kind of like drawn, and I said, wow, like, you know, at that time I was in shape, I looked like a fighter, and he thought that I was going to say some story about that. And what was funny thing, here's the funny thing about like holding your eye up with the bandage like this, is that it can't go down now. So the way that I used to actually blink is that it was held up here, and the way I used to blink was with my index finger going like this. So at that time in Milwaukee, 2012, I'm walking around town like this, manually blinking, old school. So I tell him, and I say, after he says, what's wrong with your eye? I tell him the story about what happened to my eye. And here's this person, and I went into a bit more detail, but here's this person who is cringing at the pain of another person that he just met. And at that moment, I'm like, man, that is what we are missing right now. That is what is going by the wayside right now. Human empathy. We are not feeling one another. We are explaining away, right? We're intellectualizing this existence. And not here, but as in general society, I think there's a lot of intellectualizing. Why you're wrong. And let me over-explain it. Because if I have 8 stunt points to your 3, now I'm smarter than you are. So one of the things that we decided that day as we sat down and talked about, you know, just basically we talked about 2 boys. One boy from a rural village in India, whose parents were farmers, who dreamt of a better life to come to America, and another boy who grew up in Mequon, Wisconsin. And here it was, we're going back into what was your upbringing like? How many children do you have? How were they growing up? When did she find out that you were a white supremacist, former white supremacist? Right? Oh, how was your upbringing? It must have been challenging coming here. Like, what did your parents do? Oh, your mother only graduated 5th grade. So all of these things. And no longer were we talking at one another, but we were talking to one another. And so we said, going forward, nothing, no programming. And we've been able to go around to, Arnold speaks he speaks professionally. So he goes around all over the place. But we decided that day that none of the talks would happen without us eliciting some kind of empathy. So it never come from a place where, you know, we say, okay, this is a set agenda, this is a talk. Whatever the Spirit brings to us to say to whatever, if it's children, obviously the message is different. If it is, if it's a school, it might be different. If it's corporate, it might be different. But all of it interlaced in how do we develop more meaningful and better connections. And that road has taken me now to a place, and I'm lucky to be able to work with Matt, with the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee, and we have phenomenal faith partners who genuinely believe in how do we utilize our faiths to build deeper connections with one another. So I will open it up for questions right now, and no question is a bad question. Even like I can eat bacon, so I'm good with that. That's a great question. Thank you. It was wonderful.
How often do you two are in contact with each other now?
Oh, we're in contact all the time.
Okay.
So Arnold we worked, I would say, until I got this position, we were traveling quite a bit together. And outside of that, we were just good friends. So outside of that, my kids call him Uncle Arnold. I know his daughter well. I know his mom well. I've been out to visit his father and his brother who live out in Washington. We genuinely take trips together. I called Arnold and I told him one time, this was a while back, I said, thank you. And sometimes you get into sentimental places on a reflective Sunday, and you're like, thank you. And he's like, what are you thanking me for? I'm like, not only have you been, my brother, but you've been my friend, and you've been my therapist. I didn't know that I needed to be lovingly challenged. And we all need to be lovingly challenged. And so, you're welcome, and every once in a while we kind of have those moments of, we reflect quite a bit on our friendship, and then, we thank the good Lord for bringing us together.
Did you ever get the answer to your question of why?
Why the shooter?
You said after the incident, you were confronted with a major question of why did this happen? Did you ever did you ever get that resolved?
So there's the, I think that's an ongoing resolution. That's sort of this place where I believe in the will, and whatever that will is I've told the conversations that we all have with God or with the divine, right? I said I'm done fighting with you. I accept whatever it is to accept, whatever it is that if something presents itself, you will not see me say no to a lot of things. So I think that is part of the will, is to say, before the shooting happened, I honestly took a lot of things for granted. Me and my wife lived a middle-class lifestyle. I was teaching, at that point, I was working with at-risk high school youth. I've always wanted to be of service my entire life. Even growing up, I told my mom to the point that they were kind of like, immigrant parents are such that they're like, we didn't come to this country for you to like I want to be a service job. They wanted you to say doctor or lawyer or something like that would make a lot of money, so they can just kick back and enjoy it. And at that time, she was like, service, what does that mean? It's a core tenet of our faith. I'm like, I just want to be a service. I want to do something of service. So, I was over at the DA's office before I even graduated. Then as a cop, then I worked with high school, at-risk high school youth in 53206. That was when the shooting happened. But even with all that, I think I still took life for granted. Not that, not that I was living life bad, but I just didn't understand the preciousness of it. And I honestly, I didn't understand my responsibility of service. So, the short answer is that the shooter, and the shooter really, I don't want anybody to get away from saying the shooter's name. The shooter his name was Wade Michael Page. He was once, people say, why do you use his name? He was once a boy like the children that we have. He was once, a young man who went into the military, who wanted to, again, live a life of service, I'm assuming, but there was a lot of challenges that he had. And so he was discharged out of the military. He was an Army vet. He was part of psychological operations. When he went back to his hometown in Littleton, Colorado, is when Columbine happened. So he saw with his eyes, and sometimes as boys more than girls, and I don't mean to lump or stereotype or put into this, but boys and rejection is sometimes a very volatile recipe. And so we have to start to teach boys how are you dealing with rejection or feelings of rejection, right? And I think that has to start at a very early age, but somebody didn't teach him that. So when he felt rejected by the world and he saw Columbine happen and he saw these two boys going to a school and externalize their sense of rejection towards other people, I think there's a part of him that kind of got the idea of, oh, I can do this. And sometimes that's kind of what's happening in society right now, is that there's a lot of people, and we're on the news, we hear about, Korea cares, this white supremacist group, this and that thing. Here is Arnold, the way that he lived. There's a lot of boys right now who are feeling rejected. And they don't know how to, and part of it is, I think, is very spiritual, is that they're not exactly rejected by society, but they're not one with themselves. They're not good with themselves. So they don't know how to handle that. And he definitely did not know how to handle that. And so after Columbine, he became an affiliated member of what we call, and I'm not to glamorize them either, but the Hammerskin Nation. And the Hammerskin Nation are now one of the most violent neo-Nazi white supremacist groups in the world. At that time, when Arnold was, it came up from Chicago, but yeah, they definitely had their Midwest chapters, and I think that day the shooter, also Milwaukee is a small place, and so if you know enough people, and I've been in Milwaukee for a very long time, so I know a lot of people who will tell me the truth. So outside of the investigation around what the ideology was, the shooter, Wade Page, was actually rejected by his girlfriend. At that time, he asked her to marry him, and she obviously rejected him and said, "I will not marry you." He went on a binge and was able to legally purchase a firearm and carry this all out. Now, if he wasn't able, if a lot of those things did not happen, I truly believe that the Sikh temple was chosen because, for one, people physically look different. Right? He was draped in that ideology already, but also because it's all the way back and it's a soft target. So, that's kind of like, and with the way that the truck was parked, he did not expect to be taken, he did not expect police to be able to confront him. And so then when the first officer shot him, he shot and killed himself. But I don't think it was meant to be a suicide, a murder-suicide. The way that he parked it, he was running to the truck, and he was going to get in the truck and try to get away. So, inciting a race war. But I think, all of that all works together. Right? Great question.
As far as Arnold is concerned, is there still a door where he can enter the white supremacist mentality?
No, he cannot. He's considered a race traitor. Yeah. He's probably number one on their.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Can I say it? No, I can't say this. It's church. And the S list. So he's number one. Obviously, like, who's a threat to white supremacy? For them, they consider Jews, people of color, but also they consider, and this is from him, they consider white people who are not actively white supremacists as a threat. They believe that everyone who is inclusive is actually not doing their part to keep the preservation of the race alive. They would say to you, you know that what we want to do. You know what we want to do. But you want me to do it. You know you believe in my ideology. You just can't say it. So yeah, the number one person on their S list is probably Arnold, but then it's also the people that believe in and say, you know what, I want a more loving, inclusive world. Because they would say that is a threat to the white race. Great questions. Any other questions?
I have a question. I commend you. I couldn't ever get to the point where I'd forgiven him myself, as that happened in my family. It's just beyond my capability. I look at a person like that, even hearing about it, and it makes me angry. So I commend you for your ability to get beyond the hatred that I would normally feel.
No, thank you, Dave. You know, originally now 7, almost 8 years later, right, we're really good friends. But even with Arnold, there was all those feelings of anger and really judgment. Explain to me, tell me why. So even the first conversation, it started. I mean, luckily it started off like that. Right? That's God's grace was like, it's going to start off like this. I know what you want to do, but then the shock of it was like, you're asking me about what? Like, you're asking me about what? Oh, I thought we were here to talk about ideology, right? And you know, I went home. I think the night of the shooting, I go home and I told my mom, who was also inside the Goodwater. She knew what happened, right? Because sometimes you can hear the gunshots. You know who was screaming. But she knew my dad wasn't contacting after that. So by that time, she knew. But I went home and I told her, and I thought to myself, how unfair. Why didn't law enforcement have to tell my mom? Why did I have to go home and tell her? Why couldn't they just tell her at the scene? The next day I woke up, and it's crazy how you get to sleep on times like that. But there's a couple hours of sleep when you wake up, and I saw my kids, and my wife was 7 months pregnant at the time with our third. Today we have 4. But she was pregnant at the time with our third child. And I said, if you don't forgive, this person will not only just take that life, those precious lives, but they will take the rest of your future. And so forgiveness to me really was a freeing, I'd say. And then really, like I at that time, I couldn't have told you this. I couldn't have articulated that. I just said, there's a possibility that I can forgive. There's a possibility, and I don't know what that looks like. So when I work with, sexual assault survivors or other survivors of mass shootings, my background is I'm a clinician, a trauma clinician. And when I work with them, I'd never tell them, this is what it should look like for you. Because you can't prescribe it. It's kind of like faith, right? Faith is, well, we can try to prescribe it, but until it's participatory, until we engage in it, it doesn't become mature. It doesn't become real. And really, that's the part that I do take for granted. I wasn't very spiritual, faith-oriented, or any of these other things, until I started to say, oh my God, like, this is what everybody was talking about. This is what Jesus was talking about.
This is forgiveness is what you're saying.
Yeah. No, and one of my, I'm not a Christian, but
we can help you with that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. But Luke 23:24, talks about Christ in his last 10 words, and as the Roman soldiers are tearing his clothes apart, and he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And I think about just the power of those words, and how much Christ was the ideal, how Christ embodied that, right? And really, that's the beauty of forgiveness. Sorry, we can do a 3-hour talk about forgiveness. So no, I think Brian, and
just really intrigued with what's the group that you guys serve to unite?
We serve to unite, yeah.
Just so where have you started that group? So it's under schools? Is it just churches? How many of those groups are there? How would you start up a group like that?
So Serve to Unite was more of a more of a mission rather than a group. And after the shooting happened, a lot of the youth inside the temple were like, no, we got to do something. The people that were inside the temple, the older, like the committee, the trustees and all that, they had no idea what to do. But it was the kids that galvanized the movement. And so they formed this Serve to Unite, and they're like, no, people don't know about us because we're not out in the society. We're not at soup kitchens. We're just serving our own people. We're not at this Habitat for Humanity. So I'm like, why don't you get out to Habitat for Humanity? Why don't we organize and get to, St. Ben's? Why don't we do this? And so they started to do it, and really Serve to Unite was a mission that started from inside the temple, and then later on it formed into an organization, and the organization was really, how do we use service to bring people together? How do we help? Because service is a language that everybody speaks, and no matter where you're from, who you are, if you start to do things together, then all of a sudden, like, the world starts to make sense because you see somebody who's working towards the same goal. I would say that now it has kind of returned to a mission, and Arnold does a lot of work with schools and things like that. I stepped back a little bit from the work with schools, but we were at Mount Horeb the other day, and they have a Serve to Unite chapter, Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. I don't know if you guys know where that is.
West of Madison.
Yep. So they have a Serve to Unite chapter, and a lot of it is service learning, identity development. It looks different in different places. Mesmer had a chapter, other schools have a chapter, just kind of like, how do we get these kids to not only do service, but learn about what they're doing and why it's important. So kids would take on issues such as the climate crisis, or trafficking, or you name it, and they're taking it on. But we left it up to the kids to say, okay, education is, you come into school, what are you interested in doing? What do you want to do? And so why we thought that was important was, if a child understands that they can do something about a geopolitical, local, statewide issue, then they can look in the mirror and say, you know what, I can do something about me too. If I'm solution oriented towards the world, why am I not solution oriented towards myself? Right? And so it was really, we didn't want to bash them over the head by saying, look, see the beauty in yourself, or you can fix the world, or you can fix yourself, right? The kid that's going through thoughts and feelings of suicide or harm, the last thing you can tell them is hey, you know what, you're special, you're unique, right? We do tell them that, but if they can do something outside of themselves, like, well, look at it, you fixed that, how come you can't? Right?
What I find interesting or challenging, if you've experienced something like that, one can get rid of the feelings of hate and anger because you can easily understand that's destroying you, but the part to forgive is difficult. And how you're crossing that line. You realize after many years it takes so much energy to hate and be angry that you sort of out of self-preservation, put it aside, but the forgiveness, that's the hard part.
Oh yeah. You know, there's a guy who's locked up and he's on death row, and he's going to be executed the next day. He goes up to the warden, and the warden says to him, hey, I'm going to give you one of two choices. I'm going to make you comfortable tonight, and tomorrow, we'll give you food and everything you want. I'll make you real comfortable tonight, and tomorrow you'll be executed, or you can take that door right over there. And the prisoner asks and says, what's behind that door over there? And he says, the warden says, your worst fears. And so the prisoner's like, no, I'll be comfortable tonight, and tomorrow I'll be dead. The next day, the guard comes up to the warden and says, warden, what was behind that door over there? And the warden says, freedom. And that's kind of what, sometimes if we live a life that we don't exercise that freedom, because it makes us comfortable, and sometimes bitterness does make us comfortable. Sometimes it's like, trust me, there's people in my life right now, as I was driving, I'm just like, oh my God, sometimes I hope bad things happen to them.
Don't misunderstand me, the heart doesn't go away.
No.
It never ever goes away, but you put aside the anger and hate because it's eating you.
Yeah. No, great point.
Kind of on where he was going was, it's a whole different perspective because you were a police officer.
Have you really come like to terms with, like you were questioning what they were doing, what they did at the site and things like that? Have you, I don't know if come to terms with the proper way to say it, but have you forgiven yourself and them?
Yeah,
The way things have worked?
As far as the federal,
Yeah, well,
FBI and
well, you were talking about, you wonder why they didn't get there quicker, or they didn't approach, or get into the temple sooner, and things like that. And being a police officer, you must realize that there's steps that have to be taken and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, have you come to terms, I mean.
Oh, yeah. I've come to terms with it, and
That's a cool way to say it. I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah. No. I have. That's a great question. That's an honest question, and you know, I remember doing a couple talks initially, maybe a couple months after this, and they're really celebrating the work of the police. And Lieutenant Brian Murphy is a near and dear friend. He took 15 shots and survived. I spoke to Murphy yesterday. There is the human element within the uniform, and it's, you know, we make mistakes. We, you know, and that's kind of, we're just human. We're all human. We're trying to figure it out. And is there protocol that was fixed after that? Yeah. There was a lot of protocol that was fixed after that. Originally, yeah. I mean, so that's all there. It's sad that there has to be a sacrifice for the betterment of protocol later, but yeah, no, I've come to terms with it.
Yeah, like coming right back at you again is for someone who had a career with a weapon, to have an experience like that, it's just got to be, you know, that hits you.
It does.
You know, for you.
It does.
To try to justify, I don't know, justify, but to come to terms with saying, hey, I used to use this weapon for good.
Yeah.
And now it's something that represents evil.
It does to me. So I, you know, I will say that I do own guns. I have been trained on how to use them. I maybe have 11 or 12 guns. They're all in the lockers, and they're all off-site. They're all away from my house. Originally, when I retired, and there's been a few sort of pseudo threats as well. So you take some precaution. But I would say that there's a certain subconscious that exists with having a gun and knowing that you have to use it. So you know, when I talk to people that, clients now, or people that are in relationships, I want them to kind of think about what does it feel like to you to have to use it. But yeah, no, it's really, yeah. I think that even when we went back into the temple, there was a lot of people who were like, why don't you just carry your gun? And that could be security, you could be here. And they were right. They were like, okay, you're scared, I get it. And you want to utilize, you want to have me have a firearm. But at the same time, there's a burden to it. There's a burden to carrying this weapon. Like you can't just, and even when I was a cop, there's a burden to carrying it. You knew you had it on you all the time. So it was steeped in your psychology. And yeah, no, that I've never actually gotten that question before.
Sorry.
No, that's a great question. It's a great question, a great reflection. Yeah, I'll have to think more on it.
Thank you so much. This is a powerful morning. Appreciate you.
I thank you guys. Those questions were. Yeah. Now we got to go back out and shovel.
No. Let it melt. Let it melt. There's a song that goes like that, I'm sure. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I will just mention we've been working on emergency procedures here at St. Matthew's. We've got a group that meets monthly to talk about things we do. Honestly, the sad reality is that if somebody has bad intent in that way, there's not much you can do to stop them. One thing we've instituted here at St. Matthew's is walkie-talkies throughout the entire building. So our goal was like, how do you communicate with, if something's happening down here and the third floor doesn't know anything about it, how can you tell each other? And so just so we're trying to make the congregation aware that in almost every room is one of these that you can just turn it on and communicate with the entire building. So if you see an emergency, if you see someone having a heart attack, a child missing, we're looking for a child, any of the emergencies that go on, we can use these, and we're trying to make sure people are aware of them, because if you don't know about them, what are you going to do? So, we're trying to work on how do we respond to the emergencies, and like I said, unfortunately, the reality of our world is it seems to keep getting worse. But
one of the things that we can do is just to kind of have ushers trained and see if you see something suspicious, and yes, communicate that as fast as you can, and I'll also preemptively let people know within the congregation that if they're hearing about something, a lot of times it doesn't end up looking like a Sikh temple shooting. It looks more like the Azana shooting, where somebody is mad at somebody that they love, or there's something is happening. So be attuned to everything that's happening within the congregation.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you again for coming out on it.
Oh, thank you.
Early in the morning. The guys that came out at 6 would love to not have to be the cleanup crew also. So if you could stay for 10 minutes and help put food in there, do some dishes, put your garbage in the garbage, things like that, it'd be wonderful to help out. Thanks.
Is he singing and dancing this time? Oh, wonderful. Good genes. He wants to do that as a career. So he decided on,
yes.
Yeah.
It's in here.
Okay. I'm looking for it. This happens all the time at home.
I suppose that's for
I detag myself. You're